Good afternoon and welcome to our webcast on creating a culture of continuous improvement in financial services. This webinar will look at why a culture of continuous business and operational improvement is increasingly important in order to drive more responsible and professional banking practices, increase business agility, efficiency, and build a culture of business excellence. Gordon and Kievan have put a lot of work into this webcast the last couple of months and both believe that in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, everyone will find it of value to listen to this webcast here today. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the online function to submit these and Gordon or Kievan will try their best to answer these. To kick this webcast off, we have a question we would like to ask the audience. The question is, in your working life, have you ever experienced, at least for a few months, any of the following? People are unhappy, people are unable to act on opportunities, culture of blame, lack of trust, lack of direction, manipulation of people and numbers, or silo mentality. Please use the voting buttons to select your answer. I hope you enjoyed today's webcast, and I will now hand you over to Gordon.
Thanks, Heather. And just to, whilst you're completing the question that Heather posed, I just thought it'd be worthwhile just introducing myself. My name's Gordon Dow, and I've been in banking for approximately 30 years, and I've been a member of the CBI during this time, which I have to say has, helped me in terms of my access to learning material and personal development, and ultimately aided my professionalism during this time. And when I left banking and came across a company of SA Partners, I was introduced to Kievan, who will be coming onto the call very shortly. But I just thought it was worthwhile just touching briefly that when I met Kievan, I felt that SA Partners, there was a cultural fit with my beliefs and personal values, and ultimately, with people being the core to any success, therefore I approached the Chartered Banker Institute to see if there's a way in which we could engage with its members and present an opportunity to collaborate. And this is why when I started to do some work with SA Partners around what they are very experienced in around creating a culture of continuous improvement, and Kievan is going to talk through today in more detail how that works and examples of what's made it a success for other companies. You'll be able to see some of the companies there on the screen that SA Partners work with, and you'll be able to, when you hear Kievan talking, think through from your own company's point of view how some of the examples can be used, and obviously look forward to questions that you may have into things you've experienced in the past or maybe will experience in the future. Turning to Kievan himself, as you'll see in front of you, he's a lean thinker, an academic consultant, prize-winning author. Lots of good positive things you can say about Kievan, but his style is one I think you'll find very helpful in terms of thinking through something you've either got experience in or future challenges that you may come across. And he'll talk through some of the examples he's worked with in terms of companies. But he heads up the financial services sector at SA Partners, and ultimately they're a change management company. And in terms of the thought process around the webinar today, is thinking through how the leaders are developed to drive and nurture continuous improvement thinking, and ultimately the behaviours that sit behind that, and ensuring effective strategy development to make this a success within their own businesses. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over now to Kievan Zakai, and welcome, Kievan.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you to Heather and CBI for setting up this webinar, and hello everybody. We are getting used to this new normal, aren't we? Everything's gone digital, so whereas I have to say maybe 95% of workshops and talks I give are face-to-face. I guess we all have to get more used to this in the new normal that we are now living. So, well, depending on where you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you. And I can see that the question that Heather asked, have you ever experienced any of the following? People being unhappy, unable to act on opportunities because, they're not allowed to, culture of blame, lack of trust, lack of direction, manipulation of people and numbers, or silo mentality. Have you ever worked in an organization that, at least for a few months, you had to endure any of those things? And, well, for now, 100% of people are saying yes. I mean, as more answers come in, we'll see how that changes. There is no right or wrong answer, by the way. So what we see is that, in fact, 80% of the organizations only ever stay in the world of reactive. And this is based on my experience of working with very many different organizations in different sectors, but particularly in financial services. And only 20% of the organizations ever go into creating stability, becoming more proactive. And very few, a select few, will probably move on to be in the state of excellence. So if you think of any company's path to excellence and journey to improvement, if we start with lots of instability and reactivity, then we go probably towards stability and being proactive. And eventually in a true state of excellence where everybody's potentials fully realized, or at least to a high degree realized. Now, so I am not surprised whatsoever by the 100% response you've given to that vote, although I'm curious to see where the rest of the people in this webinar chat room are sitting on that. Typically, when I ask that question, more than 80% of people, if I ask people to put their hands up, more than 80% put their hands up. And that's just evidence to the same thing that we have been observing in SA Partners, Gordon, myself, and other colleagues. Now, well, that's even more the reason to have a culture of continuous improvement. So would you be repeating the same journey if you knew that 80% of the time you would fail to get to your destination? So certainly we need to experiment and start doing things differently in order to come out of that reactive mode. Life's too short and too precious not to do that. And a very good question you may be asking yourself is that, okay, so what is continuous improvement? And what do you mean by it? In order to define continuous improvement, I probably have to tell you what it is not. So I'm not talking about discontinuous improvement. And that's what we see a lot of in financial services organizations. By discontinuous improvement, I mean top-down driven type of improvement where the senior management, the executive team decide what is the next project to work on, and they come up with the solution, and they tell people how to go and implement or what to do. It is often in very big cycles, takes several years. Whereas continuous improvement is where the senior management do the exact opposite. So rather than telling people what to do, it will enable the front line and the middle management to find solutions, smaller solutions to smaller problems. So lots of smaller iterations of improvement organically happening everywhere. Very few companies in the world actually practice that. Most companies are working on project-based change and transformation. That is actually a very big part of the problem. I am not saying that big projects shouldn't happen. Of course, we do need big projects. So imagine if your company is investing in a new IT platform. However, the point is you absolutely do need to have a balance between CI and DI. Now, as I talk you through the rest of the slides, hopefully this will become a little bit more clear. Gordon was kind enough to introduce me, and thanks very much for that. Let me tell you a little bit more about my own background. So I started life as an engineer in the oil and gas industry. I went to, through accident, I got introduced to a chap called Dan Jones, who was the person who coined the term lean. And he was at Cardiff University, his co-author and his co-lean thinker, Jim Womack, was at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So at Cardiff University, Dan invited me to go and for a short stint work with them. As it happens, that was about 17 years ago, and I have been doing the same thing since. So very soon, in a few years, we had to learn how to create change outside of the manufacturing world, because all the continuous improvement examples we knew were in the world of manufacturing, and all the big CI companies we knew, such as Toyota, were in the world of manufacturing, and we were copying what they were doing and bringing it into the financial services world and services world in general, and it was not working. So I was charged to launch a master's degree in lean or in continuous improvement for the service industry, and with some financial services focus in it. So later on, this center actually disbanded. It doesn't exist. It was called the Lean Enterprise Research Center, and Dan Jones retired. But we still have a community of people who graduated, executive degree people who graduated from there. And a few months ago, only a short few months ago, we got together to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the center. And we invited, of course, who better than the founder, Dan, to come and give a talk. And he graciously did. And, if you think about it, there aren't that many organizations out there in financial services or otherwise that don't have a big continuous improvement department. So you would expect it to be a big success. So they might be called Six Sigma, they might be called Lean, they might be called Agile, they might have all sorts of different operations excellence, enterprise excellence, performance excellence, there's all sorts of names for them. But what you are sure to have in any financial services organization of any sort of medium size or bigger is that there will be a CI department. However, he, rather than reflecting back then and saying, I started something 30 years ago and I never in my wildest dream thought that millions of people will follow in my footsteps, actually he said the opposite. He said change did not stick. He reflected back on this movement of continuous improvement and said that it has been utterly unsuccessful. He says widespread interest, of course there is, millions of people did it, millions of organizations in different sectors did it, but change did not stick. And then he went on to explain why. And he gave us some of the snippets of his wisdom, saying, well, it conflicted with modern management, which we regard as command and control mindset, paradigm. And that has played a significant retarding role. So in other words, true CI did not take root. We are still left with a lot of DI and sprinkling of some CI around it. We still live in the world where actually change is very top-down driven. The top decides what the solution is. The bottom's job is to follow. But actually in a true CI organization, it's the other way around. The front line identifies the problem, and the top of the organization, their role is to enable the bottom of the organization, the front line of the organization, and the middle management to act on those and coach them to solve those problems. Now, if we look at the movement that was continuous improvement in the 80s, we had lots of quality tools and quality circles, and it went from manufacturing to financial services and banks. Then later in the 90s, we learned that we have to look at the end-to-end processes, so we started value stream mapping. I bet that in your organization you've come across many value stream maps and maps of your process end-to-end. Then we went in the 2000s into understanding the whole system. What is the impact of the biggest system? How do we understand the demand and align to it? And eventually in 2010, the past decade, we learned actually we need to focus on behaviors. And how do we engage people, change their habits, change their behaviors, and change the organizational culture? However, as I just said, and in fact, more importantly, as Dan Jones just told us, it did not work. Something's amiss. And so that's a bit of a mystery. As we go through this, hopefully it becomes a little bit more clear. Now, I am going to talk about the what, the how, and the why of continuous improvement. So I'm going to briefly talk about what is it, this continuous improvement. I did briefly talk, but now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. And how do I do it in my organization? The 20%, what is it that they do? How do they do it? And the why. So why does it matter? And I have to tell you that the 80% only ever stay in the what. They only know the tools. They only know what to do. They only regard continuous improvement as a little bit of waste reduction, a little bit of cost saving. It is not that. The 20%, what they know is that it is a system. It is about engaging the entire organization. They know how to do it at a whole system level. And the select few, the very few, they actually know the why. They know why it matters. I'm obviously borrowing from Simon Sinek and his reference to knowing the why. Now, what is continuous improvement? Well, in simple terms, what we regard as continuous improvement of work is in fact a manifestation of what's going on inside of our own head. So we start with being in the world of contentment. There's nothing wrong with anything. But then there comes some sort of realization that, that's not good enough. We start the process of critical self-reflection. So we go from that to finding the courage to do something about the issues and the opportunities and the problems. And then from courage, we find change and inspiration. So you can say that it's it's the cycle of continuous inspiration. It's another CI that's happening inside of our head. CI is that process of tapping into our own inner strengths and our innate potentials to push the envelope in the workplace. It's a very personal, it's a very self-critical, reflective process. And I mean a critical self-reflection in an utterly positive sense rather than in sometimes used as a negative thing. But what I mean is pushing the envelope and finding the strengths and moving on. And basically that is what it is. So CI, or continuous improvement, is in fact continuous self-improvement. As simple as that. That's why the job of the top management in CI organizations is to enable their people to continuously improve themselves. In other words, creating better me will help create better you, and together we create a better us or a better world. As simple as that. It's a simple formula, but CI organizations absolutely believe in that. We often sell our change journey as a series of diktats from the top. However, what it needs to be, it should be a way of helping people to maybe remove their own overburden. In other words, every time we're dealing with change, we have to think, what's in it for me and what's in it for you? Change will not stick unless we have absolutely addressed what's in it for you, what's in it for my people, my organization. Okay, so far so good. So we know what it is. It's not very complicated at all. And you're probably sitting there saying, okay, well, I know that. That's not, that's not strange. That's nothing new. But how do I do it? How do I create it within my own organization? And here is how. We will need to have a holistic transformation model that has at least 3 elements, and it will need to have all these 3 elements hanging together in a balance. Those 3 elements are people, process, and purpose. In other words, it's about process or work, people or leadership and learning, purpose or strategy. You need to address all 3 of these in a harmony. Now, we come across a lot of organizations that are missing that harmony. For example, one financial services organization that I have been working with, we see a lot of people improving processes. So there's a lot of action in terms of CI happening everywhere. But when you go down and you ask people, okay, so what is the role, what is the direction of this company? Where is this company going in 2-3 years? What's the goal of your department? They don't know. Naturally, when you ask them, what's your role in achieving that goal? They also don't. So we see a lot of continuous improvement disconnected from what really the top of the organization is intending for us to do. Another scenario is where we see all 3 exist, but they are in separate silos. Another scenario you see a lot of is where you do have processes aligned to the purpose of the organization. And you do have a lot of continuous improvement happening on the side of people. I think people are being trained to do it and invested in to do it and coached to do it. But there is no connection, no real connection between that people bit, the investment in people, with the purpose and process. An example of this is a very large food and drink organization we work with, multi-billion-dollar organization, and they invest heck of a lot of money in training their people, in improving their people, upskilling, reskilling their people. But what we didn't see was alignment between that, engagement of that with the purpose of the organization, alignment between that and people and purpose. Now, another scenario we see a lot of, and this happens a lot in financial services, in banks especially, is where people are slaves to processes. Why is that? Because you probably have heard this before. We've invested a heck of a lot of money in some IT solution, in some platform, in some workflow system. And the net effect is that, the tail is wagging the dog now. Basically, that IT system, that process, that investment now has become the de facto purpose. And what is the right balance? Of course, it's the right glue, which is focusing on the customer result and having a good balance of all three elements. But you may ask me, so how do I know if I have these? Well, that's where you begin. That's probably where you want to start. You need to conduct an assessment of these three elements and the other three elements on the boundary between them. I mean, engage, align, and improve. So all 6 elements you will definitely need to do an assessment on. You don't have to use any particular tool for it, but of course there are loads of models out there. As it happens, we have our own model on how to do this assessment, but you don't. I'm not necessarily you have to use that. You just have to make sure that you have created that balance and you've assessed where you're standing in terms of that balance. Now, I think Gordon is going to tell us in a bit that SA Partners is giving away very limited number of assessments for a few organizations based on a first come first serve. Obviously, when this was devised by SA Partners, the plan was to send someone out and have a face-to-face and spend a day. I think the world has changed since then and everything's gone digital. It's fascinating how much we're learning in terms of digitization in short few weeks. And now, since we are talking about this massive change we're going through, and since we're talking about change, transformation, and continuous improvement, I thought I'd borrow from Kubler-Ross, one of the original change models devised in 1960s. And psychology tells us pretty much this is how people go through change. People first are shocked by the need for change or the change itself happening to them. They go into denial, they go into frustration, depression, and eventually coming out of that, they start experimenting with the new normal and find the decision and inspiration to integrate that into the new business model or new normality, to come to terms with it. Of course, how to create continuous improvement, we have to understand this Kubler-Ross model for change. But think about it in terms of what we are going through today as a society. I mean, we are talking about a global society, as a matter of fact. Now, of course, we're shocked by the sheer scale of what's happening to us. Lots of people went into denial, not to name any names, maybe President Trump. And then we came out of that with a lot of frustration. It is really frustrating. And for some people, it's even depressing. We begin to experiment. Okay, so now I have to live this life. I have to wipe that tin of beans I bought from the supermarket every time I bring it into the house. And, okay, it's doable. I have to set aside an hour a week to do that, but it's very much doable. And I have to homeschool my kids, but I probably can do it. And we go into decision and integrating into that in way of life. That's, of course, sobering experience we're all going through. But we are to some extent, everybody will have all of these. Now, it might be a millisecond for someone experiencing each of these steps, and the other way around. Some people dwell in one step. Unfortunately, some people might plunge into depression, especially if they're more vulnerable, and not easily recover from that, and so on and so forth. Now, so another example of how organizations go on a journey of continuous improvement. This book, 4+1, is a book of case studies. It's talking about one big case study in particular, that is Commonwealth Bank of Australia, the only Shingo Prize winning financial services organization out there. Just so you know a little bit of background, Commonwealth Bank of Australia reported $500 million cost benefit as a result of doing continuous improvement in short space of time, in about 2 years. This is an incredible, staggering number. The case study, the actual case study, is on SA Partners Financial Services webpage if you want to go and read it. And again, SA Partners giving away 100 free copies of 4+1 book in the light of COVID-19 for people to. We thought people might want something, some inspiration, something to read. So it's there. You feel free to go and claim your own free copy. Now, let me tell you a bit about it. So the premise here was, in order to create a culture of continuous improvement, you have to create behaviors. The behaviors collectively eventually become the culture. Now, in order to create behaviors, you have to create habits, because habits collectively eventually create the behaviors. Now, what are those habits? And this book talks about the 4+1 habits. What are the 4 habits? Visual management boards. So having visual management boards, the habit of having it, not actually physically having it, the habit of keeping it up to date and using it. Huddles, the habit of doing the huddles, not just knowing what a huddle is and doing it once every 6 months. It's about regularly using it, whatever that regularity might be for you. And then doing continuous improvement, identifying the problem, identifying the root causes, identifying the countermeasures, experimenting the countermeasures, and rolling out those countermeasures, those 5 steps. So habit of doing CI everywhere, every day. And the 4th habit of having standard work, of standardizing the best practice, not letting it slip through the net, standardizing it and allowing people to experiment with improving the standard. So the standard is owned by people and they continuously improve it. And finally, the +1 habit, which is the Gemba. So what is Gemba? That's one Japanese word you probably want to know, and that is the workplace. This is about the leadership habits. This is about leaders' standard work. It's about taking the leaders to the workplace, creating that connection. So it could mean physically going down to the shop floor for the senior management team, or it could be virtually attending a huddle, or it can be anything that takes the leadership to the front line. Now, the 4+1 habits are, as I said, the case studies are there, and the book itself is there. Also, there is this infogram. It's on the web page. You're more than welcome to go and download it, all free of charge. So a quick summary of how to create a system of continuous improvement, how to create a continuous improvement organization. Well, first off, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. Create small habits, and those habits will create behaviors that eventually change the company's culture. Start somewhere, start anywhere you can. It's as simple as that. CBI didn't report $500 million saving in the first month or 6 months or year. It took them years of exercising this. A holistic framework is required for change. And it should address 3 elements: strategy, leadership, and work. So strategy or purpose, learning and leadership or people, and work or process. So, and you need the harmony, the balance between all those 3 elements, as we just discussed. I'm looking at that poll now, Heather and Gordon, and it's unanimous. It's 100% of people have experienced. So we're not off the mark saying that at least 80% of the organizations will remain in the world of reactivity. I'm not saying that anybody has experienced it, has definitely worked in a reactive organization, the reactive 80%, 20% is my own observation of financial services and organizations at large. Now, the most important element, as Simon Sinek says, knowing the why. Why do I need to do continuous improvement? What is the need, and why bother? Why bother with any of this? Well, to talk about the why, I need to step back a little bit. The main purpose of continuous improvement is about positively engaging people. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will not forget how you made them feel. The whole idea of creating a culture of continuous improvement is about creating that warm, fuzzy feeling, the right positive feeling for people. Now, you heard me talking about lean, which is just another word for continuous improvement for me. I know that some people have reduced it to a toolbox, but that's definitely not what it is. That's why I stopped calling it lean, and I just simply call it continuous improvement. And we talked about what it is versus this continuous improvement just briefly now. I also said that it started in Japan in the 50s and 60s. Now, it's interesting because the Japanese don't have a word for lean. They just don't. They actually have another word called monozukuri. And I was with this Toyota executive, and I asked him, so what does monozukuri mean? And he said, manufacturing in harmony. What he meant was operations in harmony. And I in my naivete, I asked, okay, in harmony with what? He said, in harmony. And I kept asking, okay, in harmony with what? So he was explaining, don't you understand, in harmony. It was when it dawned on me, what he means is harmony, yin and yang, actually keeping everything in harmony. That's the purpose of continuous improvement in an organization. And at that moment of realization, he added something else. He told me something else. He told me monozukuri is hitozukuri. Monozukuri, as a word, it means making things. And in Japanese, they say making things is making people. Monozukuri is hitozukuri. What do they mean by that? They mean that it's not about making things. It's about creating better people. That's the whole purpose of creating a culture of continuous improvement. In other words, what they do, the sensei or the mentor, they are totally uninterested in the problem that they are mentoring. By the way, mentoring in the Japanese culture is not done in an abstract way. It's not so much done in the way that they tell you how to progress your career. It's almost always done in the context of a work problem. So people's coaching is related to something tangible. And the coach or the sensei is utterly uninterested in the actual problem being solved. Instead, they are interested in the actual person, in developing the mentee. That's the entire purpose. And that's the why. So we now know the why is about creating better people. Now, it's a simple formula. We said better me plus better you equals better us. Train me, improve me, give your team time to improve themselves. Give your team the space to become better. They will help you to become better and use that knowledge to help others, and that creates a better world. Now, this might sound too altruistic to be true, but there is a very successful company called NextJump that actually uses that as the strategy, and it is also the strapline motto. Now, I am personally sick and tired of talking about manufacturing Japanese companies, so I thought I used a more recent company, a unicorn, NextJump. Actually an British-American company with offices in New York and London, which is probably closer to our world. A company that grew out of nothing to become a $2 billion company. What is fascinating about them is that everybody in NextJump gets 50%, that's 50% of their time back to themselves to do self-improvement or community improvement for that matter. How is it even possible? That is the number, 50%. ladies and gentlemen. This is a company where everybody is voting on selecting their own boss. So all the managers are democratically selected. Obviously, if you're a better person at growing others, you get elected to become a manager. And everybody has a mentor as well as a manager. So there is a huge focus on improving people. You might be sitting there thinking, well, surely this is not going to be a commercially successful model. This might be okay for a charitable organization, but how on earth can it possibly work for a commercial organization? Well, let me tell you this. They are less than 250 people with around $2.5 billion revenue. If you think about it, that is around $10 million revenue or wealth generation per employee per year. Now, that is, by the way, I've adjusted these numbers for inflation. That is 14 times more than Toyota. So I've chosen 2017 numbers and compared like for like. And Toyota is only $700,000 wealth generation per employee. So staggering difference there. Now, they put Toyota to shame. I went back to look at industries historically. So what was the company at the turn of the millennium? Well, let's say it was Microsoft. So, that is also around 14 times better than Microsoft was in the year 2000. Of course, I've adjusted all of these figures for inflation. Now, what was the company if we went all the way back to 1925? Well, it was the automotive sector. It was GM, General Motors. That was the company. And it's 543 times better, more wealth generation than GM. And what about if we went all the way back to the middle of the 19th century and chose, well, what was the industry? Coal, of course, entire U.S. coal industry. That's 756 times more than entire U.S. coal industry. Now, as we see staggering success, it is possible to trust your people. It is possible to invest in them. And what I want to share with you is that today, that we're seeing this avalanche coming down on us, this coronavirus major problem coming down on us. The companies that have invested in a culture of continuous improvement, you see them come through shining. I was talking to a CEO of this company that, they are a shingle level. So after 7-8 years of doing a continuous improvement, shingle is just a prize that is given to the best of the best, the creme de la creme. And Steve was saying, well, we are winning business in this time. They're eating their competition's lunch right now because their lean system, the continuous improvement system, is just the way they work. It is just the way they work. All the huddles, all the dashboards, everybody's working from home. Everybody's on target. Everybody's focused. Everybody knows exactly what to do. They had a very good plan to put in place just in case a disaster like this happened because they thought about it, because people were enabled to be proactive. And it's incredible what they had put in place. Now, another financial services organization I was talking to one of the directors, and she was telling me the same thing. She was saying our system is holding just fine. They were one of the first, I can't name them, but they were one of the first in the world that they had to send everybody to work from home because of one coronavirus suspicious case that found in one of their offices. So they decided to take everybody home. And yet they performed perfectly, hand in glove, nothing fell through the cracks because of that robust system of continuous improvement. The 5 habits, remember, I was talking about? Those are some of the key habits in creating a system or a culture of continuous improvement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, so that's for me. It's been around 40 minutes talking to you. Thank you very much. I am very much looking forward to questions. I'm hoping we open this up and we turn this into a more interactive. I know it's difficult. It's over a webinar platform. I'm hoping that we open this up to everybody and we can have a little bit of interaction. So, by the way, before I say that, we have still 100% unanimous vote on that poll that Heather puts up. Okay, Heather, Gordon, back to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keyvan, and that was really insightful. For all our viewers today, if you've got any questions, please just submit these using the online function, and we'll just wait a couple minutes and see if any come through. Okay, we have a question that's come through. So it says, my company has been through a transformation program before, and at first everything was like a shiny new penny. However, it wasn't long before everything went back to the way it was before. Have you seen this happen? And if so, what advice can you give to prevent it from happening again next time?
Gordon, I can go first if you want. Maybe you can both answer that. But thank you for that question. Very, very good question, actually. Well, yes, it's true. First to admit, if I had a penny for every time I have seen that happening. And one of the biggest problems is the same thing that Dan was saying, that change did not stick, because we are trying to enforce change in a very different paradigm. We are in the world of command and control. We're trying to do continuous improvement. It just does not fit. And by the way, guys, command and control, the key word is not command, it's control. Because when I talk about command and control, most managers go, oh, I don't command. I'm not autocratic. Of course, that is not the 21st century style. Of course, people are autocratic. I know this. In professional organization, we don't have a lot of command going on, but there's a heck of a lot of control going on. So the key word is controlling command and control. Now, this CI thing, as we briefly described, is a very different beast. It will just not work in the world of command and control. The idea, imagine a triangle where the front line is at the bottom and the senior manager is at the top. In a command and control organization, the bottom will encounter the problems. They have to put their hand up, send the problem upstairs to the senior management. The senior management will eventually, based on who's shouting loudest, decide which one of these problems will be the next shiny project, and so it'll be a big, massive 2-year program to implement some sort of IT to solve that. Sounds familiar? That does not work. You know that. I'm not saying don't do any discontinuous improvement. I'm just saying, by and large, you need to balance it with a heck of a lot of CI in order to get results. In a CI organization, however, the top's job is to give the direction, identify the long-term problems, and enable the bottom to solve the problem for themselves, to trust them to. And that's why it didn't work in your organization. If I was a betting man, I'd put my money on that. We really need to rethink it. It's about getting commitment to this new way of thinking. Do let me know if that didn't answer the question. Happy to discuss it further. Gordon, would you like to? Yeah.
Yeah, just one thing I would just add to what you said, and it kind of comes out in the presentation, which is, you know, from the transformations that people have been through before. So certainly, in my experience within banking, that where I've seen it work really well is around the clarity of the direction and the communication being very, very clear, and explaining to people, you know, why what we're doing is important. So they'll actually understand it, and you test their understanding. And one thing that a lot of people seem to forget is showing people how to actually do what you want them to do if they don't know how to do it. And then testing those 3 steps and keeping it really simple, so that people can continue and they can repeat, and the leaders can repeat the messages, and testing that it's actually working out in the field, because it is easy to throw things aside when you think something's not working, but actually, has it really been tested, and do people actually know how to do what they're being asked to do?
And that is very important. Stick with it. Grit is a major part of continuous improvement. It's completely agree with that, Gordon. People let go of that initiative too quickly, too soon. It's about if we believe in it, trust our people, they'll do it for us. I think we've got more questions coming in. Yeah. You make reference to silos operating and the need to align. However, it's not always so easy to make this happen. How would you go about doing this in reality? It's a great question, in fact. Now, it might be worth asking, why is it that those silos are not aligned? Why do we have the situation that we have silo mentality? So one of the reasons is that, again, going back to the 3 Ps, people, purpose, and process, have we clarified the purpose? Have we worked on what the Japanese call the Hoshin system, the alignment system? It needs to be a system. It can't be just talk, because very often strategy is communicated. It's communicated quarterly. It's communicated by email. It's posters on the wall. It's communicated by memos, so on and so forth. But actually, and communicated in town halls and repeatedly communicated, But then guess what happens? We go and ask people, what's your company's purpose? What's your company's strategy? Nobody knows. Very few people, very few organizations we work with actually know that. Simple question. So you need to have a system for alignment. And that's the point here. I refer to it as a system of Hoshin, or it's Japanese for deployment or alignment. Now, you may refer to it as a system of management generally. It is about cascading priorities, cascading KPIs, linking the KPIs to what the top wants to see, to what the bottom wants to see, and so on and so forth. So without a robust system, we will never have that alignment between the silos. Now, take a situation where the purpose is crystal clear. So unfortunately, we live in a world right now, in the past few weeks, that survival is a real need. It's not a joke. It's absolutely going to focus people. Now, I bet you that lots of people in this situation now are aligned, because it's so obvious to everybody what we need to do. We need to survive. I'm not saying everybody will be successful, but at least the clarity is there. Now, in the survival mode where we are now, it's easier to create that, of course. But in the thriving world, where we probably will be in 6 months to a year, where we're back to thriving, where we were 2 months ago, it's a little bit more difficult to create that burning platform and that clarity. I don't know how much that answered your question. Gordon, what do you think?
Well, it makes me think really just around inspiration. As in one of the kind of leaders I would have looked up to, and also in my career, was around the way in which they were consistent in their message, and they were transparent in terms of what it was they were asking for. And it inspired certainly, myself and teams that I'd worked with, just around how you could actually break down silos, because the way in which you communicated and the importance of that, which links back to the other question, it's just very transparent between what it is, what the message is, and then just being consistent with it. I think there's another question, Kevin. Looks like another question here. We're struggling to get traction in some key areas around new processes and buy-in from our people to deliver the results that we need. Is this something that you have experienced, and have examples of how to approach it to find solutions? I guess, Kevin, you must have come across that in some of the businesses that you've worked with in the early days, in terms of the approach that you would have taken.
Absolutely. I mean, as you're saying, Gordon, exactly that happens in the early days, almost everywhere. I struggle to remember where it didn't happen during the early days. So, and there are some tactics. I wouldn't say these are big earth-shattering solutions, but there are some tactics that you may want to experiment with. One of them is building some credit, so early wins. Depends on who are these people, how senior are they. So is the lack of buy-in that I'm hearing, is it about frontline? Because their needs, how you build credit with the frontline is slightly different compared to the middle management, obviously compared to the senior management. The senior management might want to see the dollar value, and that's often what they are interested in. The middle management often wants to see the underburdening, because they are hugely overburdened already. They're juggling too many plates at the same time. Now, the front line, they want a little bit of certainty and clarity, as well as, of course, they are in need of underburdening. So how you build credit and how you earn those brownie points is slightly different. But please think about earning those and capitalizing them. This is often what we try to do. It's very important, very, very important that we have clear reporting mechanisms. Now, at the same time, Gordon, you mentioned communication, extremely important. That's another very important tactic. Keep communicating it. It's that beat of the music. The baton needs to go up and down. It needs to lead us. It needs to be the drum beat. It needs to be there. Now, the other things that you can do in order to, engage more with people. So finding out, have they had any negative, poor experiences with similar things? I bet they have. So many, as the other question was asked, so many transformation programs, so many change programs did not work in the past. So how can you assure them this is not yet another one of them? One of the things you could do is consider taking them to places, showing them how it works in very good places. Now, this is old world where we used to have, the on-site inside program in the UK, and so many similar ones around the world. The on-site inside programs took thousands of people around to see an experiment. It did what it says on the tin. It took people on site to gain insight. Now, and there are so many other similar ones out there. But in the new world, the on-site inside program is going digital. So it's considered doing that. It's fascinating how the good CI companies are graciously and generously letting people in. Rather than seeing this as a core competence and closing the doors and putting the shutters down, they're doing the opposite. They're letting people in, and that has been massively helping us create some buy-in. Training, that's another thing. So remember, your intervention can have three forms, and all three forms can lead to the other. So one form is to do an actual doing of an intervention. That's one form. Another form is, of course, training people, and then get the people to actually do a project, to get them to do something. You can coach them. And the third form is diagnosis. Have you diagnosed it? Have you objectively done the assessment? We talked about this assessment, 3 day of assessment that SA Partners is offering free of charge. So have you done a version of that to prove your case in terms of, okay, where we are and what are the threats and why people need to change? Back to you, Gordon.
Yeah, Kev, I didn't really have anything else to add apart from just a saying around what does good look like, and being able to to get belief by seeing that something does work. And the visits that you just referred to, similar to an event that we ran in London where we had different companies come and present on their journey and the successes that they'd had, and there's obviously lots of people in the audience who were capturing some of the key initiatives that they had tried and maybe failed at first of all, and then what it was that actually made it work for them, and just being able to share that information. So being able to go and see for yourself or experience it goes a long way. I don't see any more questions, Heather, coming through.
Nope, nothing else coming through at the moment.
No, okay. So perhaps, just in the interest of time, if I can just obviously thank those for the questions that have been posted, and obviously if you have questions post the webinar, then obviously you'll have our contact details at the end. Feel free to contact us with any questions that you may think of following the webinar when you maybe reflect on some of the information that you've heard today. In terms of the assessment that Keivan talked about, this clearly was a face-to-face offer that we were giving, but we will change this to doing this over the phone and online, whereas an assessment that can be done by ourselves to understand, linked to the book, the tools that we would be able to ask questions and find out about how things are working in a specific organisation and work with you in terms of being able to offer ways in which you can help. Maybe get Keivan just to come on that in a second, but you can see from the screen in front of you that there's a couple of places going to be given away for free. So if you are interested in this, then please do contact us with the information below. And also just to reinforce the message around the book. It's an award-winning book, 4+1, and there has been copies put aside for free, and all you have to do is to register your interest and get in touch for us to give this to you. But Keivan, is there anything you wanted to touch on with regards to the way in which that would work in terms of the assessment, or?
We are learning the new normal, aren't we? We're going digital. It'll be done via video conferencing, obviously for government social distancing advice, and there is no reason to think why we can't do a lot of these things digitally. In fact, we can do things a lot more efficient digitally. We're learning that we as a company, we gained a lot of time because we didn't have to travel as much, and we are able to service more customers. It's fascinating. And it's again, going back to the only constant is change and being ready to adapt to that. So, it's a sobering call, isn't it?
So, yeah, so it's a great opportunity if you are interested, and please do reach out to get access to the book. It gives you some extra reading material and allows you to dip into looking at different ways that it's worked for other companies, and certainly from the assessment offer that you'll be able to get some real personal support and ability to ask questions about your own personal situation in terms of how a project might be working for you or one that's coming up. And that kind of brings us to the end of the presentation. But just before I hand back to Heather, I'd just like to personally thank everyone for taking the time out in this circumstances we're going through. It's a great opportunity to connect in different ways, which this is another good example of it with regards to a webinar. And we would love to hear you. We'd love to get feedback from you. And questions from you of things that you may be struggling with, or thoughts or things you want to share with us. Kevin, any other thoughts from yourself before we hand back to Heather?
Well, thank you, Heather, and Chartered Bankers Institute for creating the platform and the opportunity. Thank you to everybody who attended. I hope you found some use and it was worth your time. I sincerely wish you and your families good health in these difficult times. And as Gordon said, we would love to hear from you. Please stay in touch and stay safe.
Great, thank you so much both. I'd just like to thank both Gordon and Kevin for providing such an insightful webcast, and of course to our listeners as well. For members of the Chartered Bankers Institute, today's website can be recorded as part of your ongoing CPD. Please remember to record this via the logbook in the members area of the website. The slide pack will be available to all listeners after today's presentation, and you can access this by clicking on attachments. You will also find a link to the SE Partners website and a link for you to be able to obtain a free copy of the 4+1 Embedding a Culture of Continuous Improvement in Financial Services book. As mentioned earlier, this is an award-winning book which contains the author's extensive industry experience, focusing on how to embed 5 simple habits to embed a culture of continuous improvement. We would love to welcome your feedback on today's webcast. Once again, we would like to thank you for your participation and thanks for listening.